I'm Ruben, and I'm the Managing Director at Smudge. Smudge is a software development firm that helps people solve problems in their business with custom software. We've created this series to help customers learn more about the software development process and the key things that set development projects up for success. In this episode, I'm talking to Michael Sheedy from Hartwell Simulation about his journey developing custom software to enable cost-effective, realistic medical simulation. This helps medical professionals improve safety and quality of care provided to patients. I hope you find it useful. So, Michael, welcome to this podcast series that we're doing, just talking to some customers that we've worked with about some of the things we've been making. Really excited to talk to you today, particularly about this Hartwell application that we've helped you create. I'd really like to get started just in your background, what you do day to day, what that looks like, and just hear a little bit about what your typical day-to-day working environment's like.
Yes, I work at Christchurch Public Hospital as a biomedical engineer, and I actually lead the team in medical physics and bioengineering, the bioengineering part of that. So we're a team of 11, a mixture of mechanical, electronics and software engineers, developers, technicians, and so our mandate is in that health system is coming up with innovative solutions within our health environment. Yeah, so I've been there for 23 years now, which is hard to believe, but I suppose part of the reason that I'm still there is that turnover of jobs. So yeah, that you never know quite what's going to happen and what's going to walk in, but also I suppose working in an environment where ultimately you're helping people. At the end of it, I find that very satisfying that the solutions that we come up with from an engineering perspective are actually helping people directly. So whether that be patients or staff members.
Okay. So in terms of outputs, what are the kinds of range of product, like things that you're helping create or engineer for patients?
Yeah, so we have limits. So yeah, so we wouldn't make a cardiac pacemaker or something like that. It's a very high risk device. We tend to stick to the stuff that we're good at. So a lot of that work, simulation is a field that we've been working in a lot recently. It's unregulated from a medical perspective. So it means that we can still operate in a bioengineering, understand anatomy, physiology, but more creating tools to train people on. So that's a really great bit that we get a lot of satisfaction out of, through to making surgical instruments. So we have a dedicated workshop that builds surgical instrument devices to help doctors, nurses, allied health professionals in the operating theatre arena where... Yeah.
So this would be, there's a particular tool that a surgeon wants and they're not able to find it in a catalogue or something that they can buy from a manufacturer, so they can come to your team and say, I want a tool that does this exact thing, and then you're able to manufacture that for them.
Exactly, yeah. So, an example of that, I suppose, is, you can get all certain types of retractors, for pulling back body pieces within surgery, and, depending on the patient, there may be a certain angle that you need to have that at, so we can modify or make from scratch devices like that. So, and we've got clever surgeons and people that think up ideas. They've been doing it a certain way, and they'll actually say, "Hey, what if we try this?" And I suppose we're an enabling team to be able to come in and actually, make something then put in their hands and try within some rules and regulations, of course.
So many questions of different parts we could say. So one that's coming to mind is just lead times around projects that your department or your team would do. Are they, what would be a long period and what would be a short period of time from, okay, we need this thing made, what's short, what's long, what does that look like?
Yeah, so that's always the challenge for us, and we're a small team. We have a lot of this rotating short work that runs over, and that's driven by priority. So our 3D printing for maxillofacial takes top priority in the fact that quite often these patients come in due to trauma and so need an operation to alleviate a trapped muscle or correct a facial defect quite quickly. And so we can turn out those models in 4 hours from the request through to actually giving it to the surgeon to get sterilised, which is quite a short time frame. So we have those very quick devices that we're outputting through to projects we have running for a year or two. And so, it's a matter of getting that blend of having people. So the way they combat is having people trained up in the 3D printing biomodelling space, so that the ones that are free can jump on a job, get that done quickly, and free up, I suppose, the time for the long-term projects to, but it's always a balancing act of keeping those priorities front and centre, essentially, and making it patient-specific, patient-centred, is a good way of doing that. Like those models have direct relevant patient need, whereas like a simulation model has a lower urgency, and so that definitely helps drive our priorities in that area.
So many more questions, but I think we'll transition a bit to just talking about simulation and what simulation is, how your department got started involved in simulation, and then could maybe then start thinking about how Hartwell became started.
So simulation for me, I've been doing it for 10 plus years, 13 years, clinically. So helping out. So but going back in my journey, I used to be in the Air Force. I started my simulation journey. I didn't know at that stage around training fighter pilots. So I looked after a system that we used to train pilots at a Hakia on air trainers. And so that was my first introduction into what simulation looks like. Unbeknown to me, in sort of 2010, I got roped into having a look at a mannequin down at the University of Otago Sim Centre in Christchurch. And so that was my first taste of understanding how simulations are used in the health field, and it was fairly newish around that time. And so I'd just bought a really high-end mannequin that was could blink, cry, breathe, do all stuff. And obviously, when you buy something like that, there needs to be a lot of technical expertise around maintaining it or running it. And so, in 2010, I ended up working down at the University of Otago Sim Centre, helping out from a technical perspective with simulation. To me, the simulation was fantastic. So it was a good mixture again of that bioengineering, so seeing something that represented the human, but also brought in another field that I really enjoy, which is human factors from my aviation days, around seeing people using equipment and devices in a clinical sense. So clinical simulation is a mixture of a whole lot of things. So there's stuff that you do in sim centres in an unrealistic environment, and then you have what's called in situ simulation, where you put participants into their actual work environment. The in situ stuff, so this is where so as part of this I met Daniel Hartwell, who is the obviously where Hartwell simulation comes from. And so during those simulations down at the University of Otago, Dan brought the anaesthetic team down to do scenarios, and I got to know Dan in the control room quite well, and he has a real passion for simulation and actually the education aspect of it. And so I suppose that started a journey, the initial journey of Hartwell simulation, and it wasn't in that environment. It was actually in the in situ environment that Dan was working back up at the hospital that he needed help in. And so that's where the linking up with bioengineering and anaesthetics with Dan, coming up with a way of creating an environment like the Sim Centre within your own environment was what we looked to do.
So you've got simulation centre, which would typically not be an actual surgical place that you do any surgeries, but a place that you'd specifically do simulations, and you're able to control the dials and shit, like, the readouts that are happening in different places. With a really fancy or high-end mannequin, you can control levels like they're blinking and just say tears and things.
Yeah,
like,
you can make them cry. Yeah,
okay.
Cough. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got a really high-end mannequin that you can have, but you'd only use those in that simulation center environment.
Yeah, you can use them in the in situ. It's different though. So in the simulation centers, you have a fake monitor on the wall. So it's more about understanding how the teamwork communication aspect of it compared to an actual live monitor. So an example of that, so anaesthetists quite often spend their time with their back to their monitors, so they're in tune to the sounds and the alarms and the noises that those monitors make. And if you've seen Grey's Anatomy or one of those TV programs, they have like lots of that, Shortland Street even, sounds in an operating theatre. And for most part, the patient's completely covered, so you're relying completely on those sounds and the waveforms on the screen. The trouble with the simulated patient monitor is it's quite often not what the anaesthetist is used to looking at. So it's like, we always use this example of, training a pilot in a 747 aircraft and then the next day chucking them in an Airbus and saying, right, we're flying to Australia, and they're completely different aircraft. Like, the flight controls are completely different where all of the screens and displays are. And sure, they'd be able to pick up aspects of that information as they go, but when it comes to those high risk and in emergency situations, you want to know exactly what your display's telling you, and that's why aviation does so much simulation for that reason. And so bringing it back into the in situ, using a real anaesthetic machine with the sound, so you can replicate that feeling that the doctors get around something's changing, I'm not happy with how that's looking or sounding, is quite a big thing to play with their instincts, and that's what you want to flesh out, is that I got that feeling that that things were going because of this reason. In the debrief, you want to understand their thinking. It also helps to allay some of their fears. Again, it's like chucking somebody into a situation that they're uncomfortable in, and then giving them completely different tools. Whereas, putting them in the situ environment with their own monitors, they know how to drive the displays. It's basically, you see them working and how they would actually work. So it breaks down some of those barriers or points that you would have around, I suppose, pushback if they got questions around what happened.
Okay. So you were in the simulation centre and you met with Dan Hartwell. And what was the problem that he had?
Yeah, so the problem he had was that in situ, so he was driving clinical monitors using biomedical calibrators. So we check quite often a device, so an anaesthetic machine, when it says that you've got a pulse of 100 beats per minute on the screen, they need devices to replicate that so that you can actually check it and go, yep, that display is actually reading or measuring that device. So Dan was conducting in situ simulations with a number of these calibrators, and we sort of always liken it like a DJ. So he was playing a music set by adjusting the pulse up here on a number of different devices, and the oxygen saturations here, and the respirate here. So he had 3 or 4 calibrators in front of him, each with their own interface. Yes, yeah.
And he was using those to then create the simulation and respond to events that would happen in a simulation.
Exactly.
By going, okay, put it over here and then put it over here.
Yeah, and because they're designed as calibrators, so you put them on once and read 100. They weren't designed to be dynamically changing heart rate and all of blood pressure all of the time. So that was Dan's biggest problem, is it was very stressful, and it was a lot of setup.
And I assume it would have a bit of training for someone else to do. Like, it would be quite difficult for someone else to pick up and and use that.
That's right, yes, yeah, it was definitely not an easy model. So Dan ended up talking to Michael Anderson, who works for Domo Technica. So he's a Fluke biomedical seller, and he had this new device on the market that did everything in one box. So it had blood pressure, heart rate, oxygen saturation, again designed for calibrating equipment and checking, not designed for running a simulation. But that was at least an advantage that Dan had, as it was all in one spot. But it was still a menu-driven device, so you had to drive down through individual menus to change. And so that's when Dan, I suppose, approached me after we're working alongside each other to say, hey, can we come up with something where I can control easily, ideally in the room, not hidden somewhere behind a desk, like a DJ, and be able to control what's happening within the room as I see it happening, responding, like you say, to people as they make clinical decisions and say put oxygen on, you want to increase their sats. And so, that device that Michael Anderson gave us as a trial was a game changer from that point of view. From there, I suppose, started the actual journey of heart wall simulation, and we never went into it thinking we're going to start a company out of this. Our focus was
solving this one problem at this point in time, which was having an interface to control these devices in situ space.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So we worked with that premise on mind that we were solving a problem within our own environment, and that's what we are good at, is I suppose solving things within our health system. So that kicked off that journey, which was really great to work alongside Dan. So I took on the part of programming up the tablet. I'd never done any software developing like that before, so taught myself how to program in a language that hadn't seen before, because I thought that it was probably the best one to build up something. And so, over the next few months, I worked really closely with Dan to understand what he needed to drive this. Of course, like working with Dan in that sim environment, I sort of had a good understanding of the limitations around, what he needed for a device for in situ. But getting Dan's thoughts around what clinicians needed as the user interface to drive the things, because Dan recognised that he'd have to give it to a colleague. He wasn't going to be able to do it all of the time. And we started working on that device, and we built up a prototype within our workshop that worked really well, driving this device.
And that was that the version that I've seen that was the Windows laptop connected into the simulation through the Raspberry Pi?
Yes,
and using Wi-Fi to connect in.
Wi-Fi, exactly. So it worked for a number of years to get that working. It was still a fairly ad hoc connected together, and whenever you wanted to make changes to the software, because I'm not a programmer, you basically had to weave for hours through the story of the software code to change one bit here which affected that bit. And so it wasn't, not a very sustainable sort of device from that point of view, from a commercial sense, or fixing a problem if you gave it out to more than one person.
Sure. And that makes sense. And one of the things that when I very first saw that version, that I really liked was just the amount of thought around the user interface, and it was really set up to be easy to use for the environment that it was made for. And so I think there's a different place to be asked to come into a project for us than normal, because usually we're coming in helping with the user interface from that level, whereas this case it was like, this has already been thought through, this already works the way it needs to work. How many iterations, what did that process look like for you? Did it get there quite easily? Did you go down a few paths and end up back in one place? Or
sort of got down there quite quickly, I suppose. From the I sort of played on the DJ, sliders / the having all of that information at your fingertips in one go, because it's about understanding for the clinician, driving it as where the patient is now compared to where you want to drive it to make sure that you align up with your learning objectives. So if it's a patient around anaphylaxis, you want to start, increasing the heart rate, decreasing the oxygen saturations over a period of time, so that the participants start picking up on the cues, I suppose, that something's changing in that system. And a good way of doing that is with the sliders, so you can see what ranges can I go to within those variables, like heart rate, can I go this far, or and then just having a simple, I can change any of these at once and push go. Was, I suppose, where we got to, and the iterations, we put it into the hands of a number of clinicians and got that feedback, I suppose, around that loop. This was a really easy device to use, that clinicians instantly got what the thing did and how they could drive it with very little training. I suppose for us, that was one goal, is we wanted to put the hands, the power of that scenario into the hands of the clinician.
Right.
In a very intuitive, easy interface. And so that, definitely ticked a number of boxes. Yeah.
I think one of the things that I see about software development and getting really fit for purpose tools is having that really deep understanding of what, in this case, clinicians need, and being able to quickly iterate and work alongside and go, oh, okay, this is that idea. What is this working for you?
Yeah.
You can try it out. And so rather than you having to describe with words and come back to say you came back to someone like us, oh, can you draw this up for us? And then you go back into the environment, and it's just getting that iteration time down on that contact point between the user and the tool.
Yes.
That makes a really, really big difference.
Yeah. And that was a great thing, I suppose, working with you guys right from the get-go, was that, you didn't come in and say, we need to redesign this interface from scratch. You recognise that there'd been a bit of work in the background to get this to the point where it was, and that interface was, I suppose, at a point where most people were happy with using it. And so, that was a breeze, I suppose, that, working with you guys, it was recognising that and then focusing on how do we make the stuff that, the software in the background, the communication to the device better. So for me, obviously working in this area, I really like that approach, that you attack the stuff that was the tricky things first.
Just jumping back to, when did you first start thinking about, we need to get some help taking this to the next level? Where do we go, and then how did you hear about and reach out to us?
So Johanna took on the CEO of our company, Hartwell Simulation, that we spun out of the then Health Board. And she had those connections. I think Smudge had worked with Johanna and Stella Ward within our hospital environment and a number of other projects. And Johanna was a real champion for you guys, saying that, they'd done a great amount of work. They got the story, the picture that they were painting in the health setting. And so, it was Johanna that had made that connection with yourself initially, with Smudge. And, for me, that really, everything she was saying translated into actual...
so then meeting us and learning about...
Yeah, because I remember that first time that we mentioned it, and I think Johanna had talked to you about coming to have a look, and he actually came into an operating theatre to see it. And to me, that spoke volumes straight away, is that you were willing to come and have a look at a very early stage at where we used it and how it was used within that environment when we're setting up for a sim. And I think you even bought some electronic sort of interface. Yeah. So you, like for me, you ticked a lot of boxes right at the get-go, that you understood the problem, you're willing to understand the problem as well further, and had a really good sense of what we were trying to solve right from the get-go. So from there, it was a really easy decision to go, Smudge, for us, looks like the place that is going to take our device that next level. So for us, it was around taking that software that I'd created poorly and turning it into something that was a lot more professional, was a lot more sustainable. There had the ability to do bug fixes or customer upgrades in the future a lot easier. So building a platform around that software, because we identified, I suppose, at the beginning that software is really the hub of communicating to the other devices, but that's the bit that the end user interfaces with. So getting that 100% correct was definitely the next goal.
I always think, doing a first version of something, whether it's a tooling or I'm sure you have this experience, but the very first version you get so many learnings from doing it that you can then take into the next version and go, okay, whether I've got the skills to do this or whether I go and get help, you know kind of what that bounds are. And I think, to me, just being able to do that first take and go, okay, I know what the bounds of this are, I know what is possible, and then you can able to do, okay, I need help in this part, or this part I need some different skills, and I think it's just such a good way of looking at problem solving.
That's right, yeah.
Because you can make such good progress within your own skills and what you can do before you work out, oh, that wasn't the right problem. And otherwise, if you're going to someone else and getting them to do that, and you have to also do the user research, the understanding, all those pieces, when you've already got a good piece of knowledge, so that you're able to progress relatively significantly. So I always think with most projects we're doing, I like to be learning at least one or two things. So if everything's new, I don't think we're the right fit. But if there's one or two bits of it that we're learning, whether for you it was programming in this, or whether for us if it's domain or a new language or a new tool or something, then I feel like that's a good number of new things.
Yeah, that is a good approach, because that growth, it keeps you sort of up to date with what's current out there as well, doesn't it? Like if there's a new tool or a new something. But yeah, I definitely like that approach as well. So you're failing quickly, so you understand the problem, but then, like I say, if it's a total failure, like I suppose that's a learning as well, as if you get in there and go, no, this is way bigger than all. I don't understand it, like say 90% of it, then I think that's, as long as you can take those learnings from there and translate it into the next sort of project, which I try and get with, say, my team. And you've done that really well in this project, is this understanding again like that electronic problem around the actual dongle. How do we communicate to that device, and then have taken that and flown with it, sort of thing. There's been some good learnings for me in that as well. So working alongside you guys, I've learned a lot of different approaches as well, which is I enjoy learning. And so for me, working alongside a team that you've got, that's been really useful too.
Thank you. I really enjoyed, because I think one of the pieces of knowledge that I had coming in was just around where we could get to with that Bluetooth interaction, and just having been alongside the journey of lots of other manufacturers, seen what they've done with trying to do Wi-Fi connections and some of the limitations, and doing classic Bluetooth connections, and just with Bluetooth LE, where you can open up an app and you can just look for a particular device and get, so you don't have any of that extra weight around setup. And I think that was one of the things when I first saw what you were doing, and based on some of the knowledge I had, I thought, we can really just make that part really smooth. And it's nice to have shipped the project now, and at a point where you just pick up an iPad, plug in the thing, and even just using, say, an embedded device rather than something running a full operating system where there's no boot up time. Just plug it in. Okay, it's there. You've got a status light. You can get the idea of what's going on. I think makes it relatively easy for a lot more people to be able to use.
And again, you did that well, Leo, from the point of view, I know when we first met in that operating theatre and you were talking about changing the Bluetooth. My previous experience with Bluetooth is that it had very limited range, and we were nervous about, if operating theatres are very noisy environments with lots of walls and shielding and stuff like that too. I suppose, that's where I learned a lot from you went down that pathway of Bluetooth, came up quickly. Lawrence had a working demonstration of a Bluetooth dongle device in its very early stages that we tested in different environments. That proved to be so good. And going down that track meant that we eliminated a lot of the overheads that Wi-Fi runs into trouble with around the router and the connections, and leveraging off, I suppose, the iPad Bluetooth connection that is managed so well. Was definitely I think that's definitely a game changer. And again, like you guys took that on, like that communication bit is quite crucial if that goes down. So you're in the middle of a scenario, and the patient's currently dead on the table. The vital signs are not encouraging, and then you go to increase it, and there's no communication, and they're doing everything they can to correct the situation, giving blood, giving oxygen, and they're not getting better. That can be damaging from the effect, like psychologically as well. So that can be very negative training. So having, even though it is a training device, you can do quite a bit of damage. So having, sorting out that comms, that's right, quickly is, and having it, so that it's up 100% of the time. I think, understanding that problem, that's where, again, that the learnings around, the environment, like so you can, it changes. It's not an office environment. It's a working operating theatre or an ED room.
I think that's one of those patterns that in mobile you really, just because you often have, like, say, with cellular connectivity or Wi-Fi connectivity, people can be walking places, going into a storeroom. If you're driving somewhere and you lose coverage, getting that just messaging right around what's going on, I think can make the user experience that much better. But it's often one of those few things that is easy to forget about doing, because you go, I've been building this thing at my desk, I've got the device here, it works fine every time I use it. And it's just making sure you actually test out those, okay, what if the device is not on when you turn the thing on? What if what if it gets disconnected while you're on? What if you walk out of the room and go back in and you lose it? Just all those little scenarios. They don't take much effort to build and account for, but it's just making sure you actually put them in and just test them.
And I can see that approach to the final product that we've got, that you've put the user first around that, because when you do, like, so I've tested this number of times, when you go out of that range, come back in, there's no, it gives you the message warning saying cannot see the device, but as soon as you come back in range, it picks it back up, corrects it, and then you're back and running again. That's a massive step from where we were, and puts the user back in control essentially around rectifying the problem. So you've taken a really complicated solution that I created and made a more elegant, simple solution in a much nicer packaging, I suppose, to take your Hartwell simulation that next level.
That's great. Well, I'm really looking forward to seeing it get some more use. I'm really happy with how I think it's a great story we're up to right now, and I'm really proud of the current piece of work that's out there. So look forward to seeing it get some more traction.
Awesome. Same. And for me, it's like, continued working alongside you guys. So I think, the platform we have now has so much potential for future. And it's, once we've got those customers engaged, learning how we can then tailor the next step for Hartwell simulation for them.
Thank you so much for doing this recording with me today and just sharing your background and your story, and particularly around Hartwell. So really appreciate your time, and thanks for participating.
Well, thanks, Ruben. It's been great. And again, thanks again to Smudge, like you guys. You're working with Lawrence and Tomo on the team has been fantastic. They've made the journey for us easy, and like I say, I've learnt a lot as well from the whole journey myself. So it's ended up not being just a device that's been outputted, but I feel like making a connection with Smudge and then also my own learnings has been really valuable.
Thank you for watching. We really hope that you got something out of this conversation. If you have any questions that have come up, please reach out on our website, smudge.com.